today, we're really immersing ourselves in the discussion around reparations for foundational Black Americans. We're talking about the direct descendants of U.S. chattel slavery.
Right.
And we've looked at sources that, well, they're not focused so much on proving the historical harm. Instead, they're aimed squarely at dismantling the two big objections you always hear, that it's administratively impossible and economically just not feasible.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what's really fascinating here is how clearly the scope is defined in these analyses.
Yeah.
It's centered on that FBA lineage, specifically tying back to the period between 1619 and 1865.
Okay.
The sources argued this focus is, necessary to really tackle the cumulative damage, the damage that created the current racial wealth gap we see today.
Right.
And that gap is then used to actually quantify the economic cost. It becomes the metric.
And that data, the data defining that gap is pretty stark. It's hard to ignore. You see white Americans consistently holding something like 10 times the wealth of Black Americans.
10 times, yeah.
And the difference in median household income, it's routinely over $24,000 a year. That's the structural injury these sources are trying to measure, right?
Exactly. That's the target. So to achieve what they call restorative justice, basically, to erase that specific gap, these economic models estimate the needed federal spending is, at least $20 trillion, which works out roughly to an $800,000 increase in net worth for every eligible Black household. That's the kind of figure they land on as the quantified debt.
Okay, $20 trillion. That number immediately makes people think, how could the government possibly manage that? Forget the cost for a second, just the sheer logistics. Hasn't that always been the claim, that tracing lineage, administering it, it's just too hard?
That is the common refrain, absolutely. But the sources we look at, they actually label these claims the administrative difficulty myth. And they point to history to argue the capacity has existed. What the research highlights is that right after the Civil War, the federal government clearly had the legal and administrative setup to compensate people connected to slavery. But they chose to prioritize compensating slave owners for the loss of their so-called property.
Wait, so they paid the people who caused the harm, not the people who suffered it?
That's the historical contradiction the sources point out. It's pretty critical.
Yeah, that definitely reframes the impossibility argument.
It does. And there's modern proof, too. We don't even have to look that far back. The U.S. government successfully managed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988.
For Japanese-American internment survivors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That act involved a formal apology and, importantly, $20,000 in individualized cash payments to every survivor. Large-scale payments based on historical status. It's been done.
So the administrative template is there.
Okay.
But that still leaves the price tag, the $20 trillion. How do the sources tackle that objection, the economic infeasibility?
Well, if you look at the bigger picture of federal spending, the impossible cost argument starts to look a bit different. Take the proposed Department of Defense budget for fiscal year 2025, just as an example. It's around $850 billion.
Okay, a massive number in itself.
Right. And the analysis points out that this figure, which includes billions in, frankly, documented waste things, like $1.15 billion for aircraft, the military itself says are obsolete.
Obsolete planes.
Yeah. That money represents capital. That, the argument goes, could be rationally reallocated, moved towards internal structural investment, like reparations. The point isn't that $20 trillion is small change, but that the money exists within current federal budgets. It becomes a question of priority.
So if the administrative capacity is arguably there, and the funding is arguably a matter of reallocation, why decades of delay? We keep hearing about H.R. 40, the bill proposing another commission to just study reparations.
Right. And the sources we read tend to characterize this constant focus on commissions as, a political avoidance strategy. A kind of strategic ambiguity is the term used.
Avoiding the actual decision.
Essentially. The argument is that decades of research, legal, economic, already exist. We can quantify the debt, we can establish the framework. So demanding more studies now is framed simply as a political tactic for delay. It echoes that old saying, justice delayed is justice denied.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? The sources we dove into seem to conclude that the main roadblocks to reparations aren't really logistical or financial. They're presented as fundamentally political and, perhaps, ethical choices.
Yeah, the core argument in this analysis is that compensatory justice here isn't about a handout. It's framed as the return of wealth, opportunity, status, things that were systemically stolen over generations.
A debt owed.
That's the perspective. And the final thought these sources leave you with is about national priorities. What message does the nation send when year after year it prioritizes massive spending on external threats, often without question, while deferring action on deep internal structural injustices? It really becomes a question about what kind of society we prioritize building.
Definitely something to think about. We encourage you, if you're interested, to look into the specifics of precedents like that Civil Liberties Act of 1988. It helps understand the administrative template the sources argue is already there. Thanks for diving deep with us today.